Good morning. I'm Mina Al-Oraibi. Thank you for joining us for the Nationals Conversations at Cop28. Today is Finance Day at Cop28. One of the big conversations being had here is the need to make sure that we have the financing for climate action, be it mitigation, adaptation, resilience, the energy transition. Everything needs money. And to have a conversation about what that means, we have with us Director of Middle East and Central Asia at the IMF, Jihad Azour. Jihad, thank you so much for making time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's a busy day being Finance Day, so thanks for being here. I wanted to start by asking you, how's COP28 been so far for you?
Well, look, let me speak with the lens of the region. This is the second COP that is taking place in the Middle East. Last year it was in Egypt, this year is in UAE. I think it's very important for the region to take ownership of the climate issues because climate issues are very important to the region too. The start of this COP was and is very promising. We saw a couple of important developments, important announcements that are showing that promises are now translated into actions. We need to do more, we need to scale up, and I hope today at the Finance Day we will translate this into more hard figures. And also, we need to bring all the parties together. The private sector is an important participant, and it's the one that will put the big bulk of the financing. But this cannot be done without the regulators, the state, and also we as international organization play an important role of bridging, coordinating, and coalescing. And I think this is where I see this happening this year. And I see certain number of milestones that were aspirational in the past, now are moving into more operational.
Such as?
Look, the loss and damage. It's 30 years objective that is taking place. We would like to see more money into it, but I think it's a good start. It's a good start because this now, it's something that we will see happening, we will test, we will scale up. And also, I hope it will convince that we are all living together and then providing support for low-income countries dealing with issues that are important. Last year we saw Libya, Pakistan. Those are important issues in our region because the cost of those natural disasters is huge, and especially when it is combined with fragility, it complicates the matter. Therefore, yes, to consider this as global public responsibility, I think it's important.
You mentioned rightly that we were in Sharm el-Sheikh for COP27 and now here in the UAE for COP28, but in between also there was the IMF and World Bank meetings in Morocco.
Exactly.
So it really does feel that this region is at the nexus of these major global alliances, agreements, sometimes disagreements on how we move forward on climate action. And as you said, here in the Middle East and Central Asia region, we have temperatures rising twice as fast as anywhere else in the world. So we're seeing also the pain of it more here. How do you think the Loss and Damage Fund that is now being operationalized can move the needle on this issue?
Well, look, losses are important and then can have a big impact on the economic activities of many countries. Last year, Pakistan assessed the damages and then it exceeded 3% of GDP of immediate loss. Libya also, especially in cases of low-income countries where resources are very limited and where those damages not only have an economic impact, but also humanitarian impact on food security. This is life. It's not only an impact on infrastructure. So it's very important to help those. By helping those, also you help the planet. But also you help the economy of the globe. And you improve security because you reduce pressure on immigration, you reduce many issues that are currently becoming most of the challenging problems we have. Geopolitical tensions are in most of the cases triggered by climate issues or creating climate problems. Therefore, I think what we are discovering that those linkages are important and we have to not only look at it from a supply side or a demand side, we have to look at how all these pieces of the puzzle should link together.
It's so interesting you say that. We've had in this same chair UNHCR High Commissioner Filippo Grandi, and also Vice President for the IFC for Africa, Sergio Pimenta, saying very similar points. The idea that the humanitarian, the developmental aspects come together, and of course the geoeconomic and the security. I have to raise the issue of Gaza because, of course, while we meet here, there's also the war ongoing in Gaza. We're seeing terrible tragedies at the moment. Your assessment of the war in Gaza in terms of the economic impact on the Palestinian economy, Israeli economy, but also the wider economy, and then how war really makes this climate effort all that much harder.
Well, look, first of all, we need to think about the humanitarian toll of this war in Gaza. Both impact on people, impact on life, impact on the future. Economically, of course, there are several levels that you need to look at in terms of impact. The immediate impact on the epicenter, but also there are ripple effects on the, I would say, the main adjacent countries. Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. But also you have larger waves of impact of this crisis. What are those implications? Of course, in terms of economic activities, you see a lot of destruction of infrastructure, destruction of output, which will bring the economy to negative growth in Gaza. When you look beyond, Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon are affected, of course. I think the first channel was tourism and trade. We saw, on the other hand, some pickup in risk premiums on the financial side, widening of the spreads of the CDS, but a few weeks after, it normalized. The other, I would say, obvious issue you look at is the impact on oil and gas, because this is a region where oil sector is very important. Here also, we saw a peak of the oil price. It went up to $92, almost 10 days after the beginning of the events. But prices went down. I think both in terms of supply, we know that there is a large share of spare capacity that still exists. We are discovering that geopolitical events have a limited impact on the oil market. I think we saw over the last decade a series of geopolitical events. 2019, we saw in 2014, 2013, and so on. Therefore, the impact of geopolitics on the oil market has lost its, I would say, its big impact. Yet, I think what we see today is the high level of uncertainty. And this high level of uncertainty is not only impacting the short term, but it could have an impact on the long term, especially in a world that is fragmented, and especially that those fragmentations are being coupled by number of conflicts in the region. And this is where I think also we put a lot of attention at the fund. How fragile and conflict states are dealing with those issues. We see a much bigger impact of climate events or of those tensions on their economy. We saw also a bigger impact during COVID on those economies. This is why we are coalescing with others in order to combine the role of the fund in terms of providing financing, macroeconomic stabilization, policies with what others are doing in terms of humanitarian support, developmental support. And I think by working together, this is how we can produce an impact.
You've raised so many points. Okay, so first, and I'm going to ask you for brief answers so we can give a chance to others to answer us. Just this idea that oil prices are not being affected directly by geopolitical events. Why has that happened? Why has that shift happened?
Oh, for various reasons. One, because the capacity to recoup was very quick. If you take the 2019 case, 5 million barrels were put out of the market 3 weeks after they were back in the market. The level of reserves was immediately put in action. And we still have spare capacity in the system. Therefore, I think we, of course, geopolitical events have an impact, but it's somehow short-lived, and the impact is on the price for a few weeks or a few months, depending on the on the way the market is behaving. And currently, when you look at the demand is playing more important impact on the oil price. Of course, the region is 1/3 of the global output in oil and gas, almost equivalent in terms of export. But still, there are years, and we saw even after the Ukraine war, that there's a quick adjustment in terms of providing new sources of supply, changing the routes of channeling both oil and gas, and therefore I think the market has improved a lot in dealing with crises.
And oil prices, of course, crucial when it comes to climate action, because of course as prices surge, there's a different reaction than when prices are dipping. So how does the oil price and that kind of fluctuation affect climate action and the economies of this region, the oil producers but also the oil importers?
Look, economies of the region are very diverse, and in your question you alluded to that. Adaptation is something that is needed for all our economies, because this is a priority, because the climate cost in terms of the rise of temperature, that is twice what we see globally, the impact of lack of rain requires investing in adaptation, and this is the first priority. Mitigation is also important. We don't have a lot of large emitters in the region, but still, I think it's important for the region to contribute. Transition is of course very important for oil producing countries. But I think what we are seeing is we see a huge investment in renewable energy that now has long history in terms of not only experimenting, but expanding. And I think this is very promising, because also we need to look at the positive side of climate work. Climate is also a potential for additional investment, potential for growth, and also it's a potential to create jobs. The region needs a lot of jobs. For youth, for women, we need also to create jobs. But also, I think what is important is to add to the lever of financing, the lever of policies. Carbon pricing is very important. It has to be done properly in order not to create a lot of negative impact, but it's very important. Also, subsidies. Subsidies are still very high in the region. There are other ways to provide protection, more effective, more targeted, and therefore we need gradually to move toward this level of subsidy. Removal, but different social compact. 3 is we need to put the resources to create opportunities in the region too. And I'm happy to see some of the large sovereign wealth funds are not only, I would say, invested, but also they want to create certain comparative advantages, certain leading positions. And I hope this will extend not only to the oil exporting countries, because I see great opportunities elsewhere. We are in Morocco, a country that has moved very rapidly and boldly in terms of climate transition. We provided Morocco with $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion. This is the first RSF program, the Resilience and Sustainability Facility in the region was provided to Morocco. We're preparing another one for Mauritania, 250. Mauritania is a country with a lot of potential in terms of also renewable.
$250 million?
Million dollars. It's going to be approved by the board hopefully in December. And other countries, Egypt, Jordan. Therefore, this financing facility, we hope it will be a kind of a gateway to provide more support by other institutions like the World Bank, who is also scaling up financial support, but also the private sector. And during the Finance Day, we will have several events whereby we are going to discuss with the private investors, with other institutions, financial community. We will be issuing a very interesting paper. I hope we will launch it here in Dubai for the World Government Summit on climate finance and the role of the financial sector and the impact of also climate events on the stability of the financial sector. We have interesting evidence on how to scale up finance and also how to make the financial sector be more proactively involved in that.
One of the things that struck me about COP28 is how mainstream climate conversations have become. 10, 15 years ago, I think it would have been very difficult to get this wide array of people to be here. Yesterday we had Health Day. We also spoke about peace and recovery as part of climate. And finance before was almost the niche. I want to ask you, just Jihad, in your day-to-day, how much has climate become more central than where you were maybe, say, 10 years ago in terms of thinking? And then how does that change decision-making?
Look, at the end of the day, we are talking now about trillions. And those trillions need to come somewhere. You cannot, it doesn't grow on the trees. And also, government cannot do it alone. Mm-hmm. And even us, we cannot do it alone. We have a large balance sheet, but we cannot do this alone. And also, those are opportunities for investment. I feel that we are talking more about climate, and we will be talking even more, because the next generation is much more aware about climate issues than our generation. And I think this is going to translate more into a virtuous circle whereby we will see more innovation that would require seed money to grow. We will see more demand for adaptation and also for transition. And this also will need some financing. And I think we are gradually discovering that growth is going to come from new sectors. Technology is one, artificial intelligence, health issues, etc. But climate is another one. And when you look at the number of startups around climate, the number has multiplied by tenfold over the last few years. Therefore, I think we are at a turning point. Our managing director called it the Cop of Hope. I think it's really a Cop of hope for more awareness, and also I would say even something more working together. I see it. Okay, we have different stakeholders here, including the oil producers, including large economies, big emitters, and you don't see a fragmented world in this scope. And I think it's something that is useful to build on.
But what's the challenge? I mean, it makes political sense, it makes economic sense, and yet we're not as fast as we need to be on action. And almost everyone I've spoken to here seems to think that we're not going to be able to meet the 1.5 degrees temperature, stopping the temperature rise from there, but they're going to try. The global stocktake isn't looking too positive. What's the holdback? What's the challenge? What, in your assessment, is the biggest challenge in your field? I'm not going to ask you to talk globally, because there's lots of them.
No, but if you ask me what is the challenge, I would say this is a long journey. If you ask me what is the second challenge, is you need to accelerate some of the actions. You cannot set targets for 2050 and backload it. You need to start front-loading. 3, you need to learn how to work together. And 4, I think there are policy issues that would require strong political support. We see even an advanced economy, including in Europe, a region that is very much sensitive to climate issues. We see some backtracking because, yes, climate would require investment, would require effort. How to distribute this? This is part of the social contract of the future. I do not see this only from a financial lens. Although I come from, international financial institution, but this is a big transformative issue that has to be at the core of the new social contract. If you don't put it at this level, you will always look at it from a sectoral approach. I think we are now beyond the sectoral approach.
COP28 helped us to get to beyond the sectoral approach?
Look, I think the COPs are let me also give credit to COP27, to the Egyptians. The loss and damage was activated last year. And I'm happy to see that the transition between the Egyptian presidency and the UAE presidency worked extremely well, which shows that in our region, countries cooperate, and I'm happy to see that also the drive that UAE has, which is drive for result. I think this is what the COP president said since the beginning. We want to see results. We want to move to actions. I think we are seeing this. Immediately, day one, we went into actions. also the pragmatic approach led to people to come together and manage their differences. And instead of waiting until the end of the 2 weeks discussion, things have moved. I think it has created a new dynamic. It's important to build on it. I'm happy to see that, after 2 years of COPs in the region, there are many people around who are discussing those issues in our part of the world. I think it's very important. Despite the many other challenges that we have to face, high level of debt, issues of inclusion, job creation, and in certain countries, stability, but yet the climate is finding its way. And I think people are considering that climate is part of a big thing. It's not one segment that we look at it, only from a sectoral lens.
I have a final question, and I'm going to come to your questions. You mentioned that fragile countries and countries that are going through volatility in the region, for conflict-ridden countries, they're the ones that are most adverse to climate effects, partly because a failure in governance means that the steps needed for mitigation and adaptation are often delayed by governments. So how can we make sure that the most fragile of countries, again, be it Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and so forth, can actually be helped in getting ahead when it comes to climate action?
Look, we did recently an interesting analysis on that. We have a paper that has been published last month in September, 2 months ago in September, on that. And it was an eye-opener for us. I would encourage everyone to read it, because you have multiple of challenges in those countries in terms of impact, in terms of the, I would say, how this could stabilize, and there is a kind of vicious circle. Climate raises uncertainty, creates tension. Tension also affects your livelihood and deteriorate climates. When you look at Sudan, when you look at Yemen, when you look at many other countries who are enduring conflicts, you see how this is becoming also part of this vicious circle. Therefore, it's very important, and we wanted to highlight the importance of that. The difficulty is in those countries, a climate event has 4 times negative impact, and therefore you need to act fast. The other difficulty, institutions are weak. And you need to build institutions in a political environment that may not be the best. It needs financing, and this financing should come, most of it, in terms of grants, because the creditworthiness of those countries is not at a level where they can borrow from the market, and they cannot afford that. Therefore, it's very important to pay attention to those. Paying attention to those is also something that is strategic, because this will increase the level of stability in the region. This region needs more stability, needs more predictability, and therefore helping countries in fragility, dealing with those issues, would not cost much, but will provide huge positive impact. And I think this is also something that we need to figure out, how we can increase this support, because we share the climate together, okay? And how we can help those who cannot help themselves.
Great. Questions from the floor. We have a mic.
Thank you for your comments. That's very interesting. I thought what you said about backtracking and the new social contract for the future was very interesting. I mean, there is a risk that governments cannot or will not sell this need, for a new social contract to their people very well. We've seen the UK backtrack on climate ambitions. We've seen the Dutch government lose an election over what became an argument about climate. I mean, I suppose my question is, how important is it that governments address this with their people, and what is the risk of failing to do so?
Look, I think you are raising a very important issue. And again, it's not an issue of developed economy, it's also an issue of an advanced economy. Look, one, I hope that the next generation will be more accepting those constraints. 2, I hope also that the way we work will help us reduce our dependence. I think we have learned over the last 2-3 years that there are ways whereby we can work with the same level of productivity and produce less negative and harmful impact on environment. We have developed even our social context around an energy that was affordable with a very limited concern about our carbon footprint. I hope that we are going to see more change in our behavior. Therefore, but this will take time, okay? Which means that in the short term, you need to compensate those who are the most affected. And here where fiscal policy plays an important role. I think this is something that we at the fund, we are very much focused on, is how you play the different levers. The fiscal one is very useful because it helps you provide targeted support, redirect resources in order to help those who are the most affected. It also, the fiscal, helps you to change the revenue model because we believe that a large portion of the way we will finance the climate effort is through revenue measures. And here we have a potential of more than $1 trillion per year of revenue measures. This is an important dimension. 3, we have a huge potential of capital that can be mobilized. We need to develop the instruments. We need to develop also the risk mitigations. There are new activities that will emerge. And I hope those elements will bring a new combination. And we will keep having those bumps, I'm sure. But I see us more serious globally and including in the region about that than maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, Mr. Azour. I wanted to know, there's a lot of talk about climate financing happening during this event, but do you think there's enough being done to de-risk climate investments in emerging and developing markets?
Well, you're raising an important issue. I think this is an issue that is still being debated about who will take the first loss, what is the best environment for the private sector to operate. And here there are a certain number of new developments, not only on, because also we discovered that even on some of the infrastructure things in terms of information sharing, risk assessment, risk measurement, developing common standards, those are important issues. And there are few initiatives in order to see how we can combine and scale up. What we call the billions for trillions is the mechanisms whereby the blending will allow, maybe at least in the beginning, a different form of risk sharing in order to provide more assurance for the private sector. There are issues also related to the investment framework. For example, we at the fund, we provide assistance to countries in terms of public investment management, because this is very important. You are asking the private sector to invest in a long-term infrastructure with high uncertainties and risks. Therefore, you need to help in developing the right framework for investment. And this is becoming more and more important. You need also to have your financial sector fit and proper for that, both in terms of developing an insurance market that can take those and a financial sector that can channel resources to finance those long-term projects.
So I want to ask you, one of the things that we constantly hear about is innovation, that we are seeing innovations that can bring down the price of the energy transition, but just generally what can be done in terms of, again, climate action. So what innovations are you excited about? And this is not an IMF position. This is you personally, from what you've seen. What innovations do you think this is going to move the needle?
I'm not an expert in that, but I would say as a citizen, I think what I see today is a lot of effort in order to reduce the cost of producing new form of energy, the cost of storing it. We were discussing before this session with few experts on that. I think all these developments would lead, hopefully, look, if you look at the history and you go back to the beginning of the 20th century, coal was dominant up until the mid-30s, and then fuel came in and you see a major decline in the utilization of coal, which is even more polluting than gasoline. Yes, I think we are going to see through all these small initiatives, few that will change. My hope is that something will come to reduce the cost to a level where it becomes affordable for low-income countries, for middle-income countries. I think this is what will make a global difference. I'm sure that there will be very sophisticated innovations where technology will bring us something that is very attractive, but I would hope as a citizen that we will discover through technology a way to make it affordable, because affordability is what is lacking for low and middle income countries. And the second thing is we have huge potentials. Africa is a continent with huge potential. How we can use those innovations in order to accelerate the transformation of a continent who could bring a lot to the humanity.
Now, until it becomes more affordable, or at least the more fiscally incentivizing or sustainable for countries in the region, what can the IMF do to ensure that climate is at the heart of the planning of governments and what they're doing when they're taking on mega projects or as they continue with their development?
Well, look, we already moved on that, and I think it's now clear for everyone that the fund has put climate at the heart of its work, because we consider this is critical for the macroeconomic stability and the stability of the world. Therefore, we consider it macro critical and we work on it. And we work on it from different angles. We provide financing, which is new for us.
Right.
We provide long-term financing because we consider that this is long-term transformation. And this is something that is an innovation for the fund. We had some resistance internally and also by the members.
Internally?
Of course, because the work of the fund historically is financial stability, helping countries dealing with certain immediate shocks. But we thought that this is something important for the planet and also for bringing others. And this is the role, the catalytic role of the fund, the leading role of the fund. The second thing that we did is we are building a global knowledge hub at the fund in order to provide information, analysis, research that is very useful. When you assess the impact of climate on the financial sector and how the financial sector can play, how you can preserve macroeconomic stability, this is very important. When you develop information on what are the needs, etc., how you transition, this is very important. But also, more importantly, we work at the country level. It's part of our surveillance work. When we do what we call the Article Force, when we do the scanning of the economies, we focus on climate. And this is something that is becoming like what we do for the financial sector. Therefore, it's becoming a priority for us. Are we alone? No. We recognize our role and we don't want to step out of our zone of, I would say, expertise. But it means that we work with others. And this is why our presence in COP is growing. We have a bigger team here, spending 2 weeks talking to different stakeholders. We have more activities. And we help the COP and we partner with Cop28, and we want to continue doing so in order to bring what we consider as the role of the fund. Global stability, global financial stability is something that would require us to be also global when it comes to climate.
Thank you, Jihad. My last question to you before we wrap up our discussion is, what for you would deem this COP a success when it closes on the 12th of December, or if it delays maybe by a day as negotiations are ongoing? What for you would deem it a success?
Well, this COP is of good start, I would say. We saw movement, we saw action, we saw commitment, and also we saw that certain number of issues that were a bit taboo are being raised, and not only raised, but discussed in a constructive way. I think it's an important step.
You mean fossil fuels?
And other issues. I think that accepting that there is global responsibility for, helping countries who don't have the resources
Right.
deal with climate issues, I think it's a big step forward because it's something that we can build on for other issues too. I feel also that the civil society is more involved. And in our discussion, in my discussion with civil society, I feel also this momentum growing. I'm very happy for the region because those are issues that are very relevant, and I would say even more relevant than in other parts of the world, and for the region are part of the future. I'm happy to see that we're discussing those issues. And I hope this will create more opportunities whereby investors, whereby large financial institutions will see the opportunities in the region and will work with the region in order to become one of the major hubs of the new energy. I think when we saw Mazda, for example, growing of this size and becoming one of the global players, I think it tells us that yes, there are opportunities here. And we need opportunities in the region. We need to create jobs. And we need to create those jobs that will allow the young generation to succeed. No, I think it's a good step.
It's a positive note to end on. So from the needs of social contract, where climate action is at the heart of what governments do, but also their relationship with their people, to thinking about revenues and opportunities, innovations, and the huge potential of capital when we think about it, but also the importance of having had 2 COPs in the Middle East, North Africa region, also having had the IMF World Bank meetings here in Marrakesh. There is momentum built. Of course, we still have to contend with the devastation of conflicts, continued occupation, of very challenging situations in the region, but the macroeconomic stability in the long term will rest on climate action. Thank you so much, Jihad. This has been so insightful.
Thank you for
your
me.
time. Thank
Always
you
a
for joining
pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.